Well. Good morning, everybody. It's Robert Phoenix. Robert Phoenix. Take two. It's Robert Phoenix with your morning cup of reality, also known as 15 Minutes of Flame. This is where we start the day off with some interesting news and views. How was everybody today? It's kind of funky and cold and damp here, very winter-like conditions, and it made getting sort of going here a little. I had put a little more effort into it today. Let's check in with the best chat in the internet, Chatlandia. Let's see what we got here. We got Judy. There she is. Hi, Judy. Misty Miner. Today is a misty morning, Misty Miner. There's my man MC all the way from California. What's going on, Michael? Nice to see you in the chat. We're just going to let things percolate a little bit. How are things in your part of the world today? We are about high 30s, around 39 this morning, 40, cold, damp, rainy. I think I might have heard a little bit of thunder. So that's where we're at. And then tomorrow it's supposed to be 70 degrees. So the schizophrenic weather patterns are continuing to establish themselves, not only across this fine nation of ours, but the world in general. Coming off a really great Sunday night show. If you haven't seen the Sunday night show, I urge you to check it out. It was a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground. We looked at coronavirus one more time as it relates to China and China's chart. We also got into a couple of other charts, Pete Buttigieg, and the charts of Amber Frey and Scott Peterson. Little tabloid astrology, as it were. It was really interesting. Somebody asked me a question about how could I do a chart on Pete Buttigieg if I don't know his birth time. It's a fair question, but there's a thing in astrology called rectification. And rectification is being able to try to align or realign a chart based on certain factors and certain questions and certain markers in somebody's life. And it's something that I do and I work with people that don't have an exact birth time or may not even have a birth time. I've done that. I've tried to work on them and pretty successful for the most part. It's a once you know what to look for and the questions to ask and kind of go over it, you can begin to kind of like bring it into focus with a chart. So it was a good question. And there's a woman who is sort of the queen of charts and data banks, Lois Roden. And Lois would also do some rectification as well. So when I don't have somebody's chart, so when I don't have somebody's time for their chart, what I will do is I'll either set a sunrise chart or I'll work on rectifying that chart. And in that moment, and this is clear when I do something like that, in that moment, that's what I'm doing. I'm rectifying the chart. And I'm looking for certain things inside the chart which are going to speak to me and give me some ideas, some clues about, where that ascendant might be. And I did that with Pete Buttigieg the other night. And his campaign is such a bizarre campaign. I was watching Tucker Carlson, who I think is probably one of the only truly great voices left in the mainstream media. I mean, it's not even close. There's such a wide gap between Tucker Carlson and everybody else. Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity, who I'm not really crazy about for various reasons. And the reason why I like Tucker so much is because Tucker is the one voice that does not seem to be overly influenced by Zog. If you want to know what Zog is, it is the Zionist organized government, right? So Tucker seems to be able to skirt around the Zog issue, although he will talk about it indirectly. And I have a lot of respect for that guy. Of course, he's got a lot of money. He's an heir to the Swanson frozen food family fortune. So Tucker, he will not suffer. Tucker will not suffer. And I think on some level, when you won't suffer, you can take a few more risks. However, if you are vulnerable and you may suffer from speaking out, then it might be a bit more difficult for people to get the truth out. This is just the way these things work. So let me check in with you guys in chat as I continue to kind of riff here a little bit. But anyway, it was a good show. You should check it out. 2.5 hours long. And for everybody who has subscribed to the channel, thank you very much for subscribing. And that's what you get. You get 2.5 hours of hardcore, straight, astrological, mundane content, with a little bit of humor thrown in to boot. And then you get this 3 days a week, 15 minutes of flame. And then, of course, we got the Friday Farcast as well. So that's 5 days of content, nutrient, dense, rich programming. And this Friday, I'm going to be joined by my buddy, Ra Castaldo. And we're going to talk about a number of things. But one of the topics we're really going to focus on is practical mysticism and the things that you can do and employ in your life to stay switched on, that don't cost you an arm and a leg, and don't force you to go take a plane to Egypt or India to tap into whatever enlightenment is available to you in your immediate environment. So that's going to be a good one. And then the following week, it's going to be me and Regina Meredith. Regina is now a social media outlaw. I don't know if she's resolved her ban from Facebook or Twitter yet. We'll find out. We'll find out more about that in 2 weeks when Regina spills the beans on how she got bumped from both of these outlets. It's going to be very interesting. I personally wouldn't picture Regina getting bumped or shadow banned or banned, period. I just couldn't see that, right? I just couldn't see that. But apparently it's happened. So we're going to find out more about that. And that's going to be on the Friday Farcast. Now, last Friday, we had a great show with Steve and Chris. Fantastic show on Kazakhstan. And of course, it kind of went off the rails there at the end a little bit because of a crisis that Steve and Chris had to deal with. Well, don't fret. We're going to do part 2. And I'm sure part 2 will be just as enlightening as part 1. So when they come back on, during their next appearance, which is always the first Friday of every month. So we're talking about the first Friday in March. We're going to dive right back into Kazakhstan. And people who do subscribe to the show, I put that one on ice on YouTube. So what I did is I put it up on secure encrypted server, and the subscribers of the show got that show. Not that I did it because I'm holding back content. I would never do that. Just I've always been pretty transparent, pretty upfront with everything, content-wise. But it was like, okay, you guys have chipped in and you're paying for stuff, so here you go. You're going to get to see the show, and that's not going to happen all the time. But in this case, membership has its perks, as they say. All right, let's check in with chat. Let's see who's in the chat. We got a lot to cover today, and I'm trying to get out of here in a relatively short period of time. There's Christine, Diana. There's Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Mary Grether, and then Natasha. Hi, Natasha. FUP77, good morning. There's Joe. Yep, it's easier, isn't it, to be independent when you have money and security? Absolutely. The energetic trail, is that trail or troll? Hey, it's Valerie. Hi, Valerie. Good to see you. I know who Valerie is. I'm still not sold your love for TC. What's TC? Tucker Carlson? It's the guy, whatever. Is anybody fucking perfect in the world? I mean, is anybody perfect in the world? Is there anybody perfect? If they are perfect, I guarantee you they don't have a media spotlight on them, okay? He's the one guy that has a bit of a voice. He has a bit of a voice. And when I see him talking about, who isn't tainted? I mean, if you went back into my family lineage far enough, you'd find that I have Freemasons. Even though I'm not blood related to them, you'd find out, oh, really? Oh, he's got really high-ranking Freemasons. I mean, sometimes it's even ridiculous. Like one time, I replied to something on Henry Macau, and it was my name, and some guy who wrote a story on something, and he saw that my last name was Phoenix, and he equated me to River Phoenix. Fucking Jasper. He equated me to River Phoenix and all this other bullshit, and it's like, it's just sometimes it gets just so tangled in a lot of ways. Yes, Tucker's got shit in his background. At the very least, he's giving voice to things that I think are worth looking at. Like he tore into John Bolton. He called him a viper, called him a snake. Like who else does that? At the very least, it gives me some kind of psychic output. It's like, oh, great. Somebody else sees this guy's a creep and nobody else is talking about it. At the very least. And if that's the case, I can just kind of blot out his Swanson family background. So that's how I feel about it. Yes. And you know what? Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. Okay. Let's see what we got here. I want to get into where we are with some of this stuff. So there are a couple of stories on the political side of things. Why don't we start off with, let's get to the top story today. And that's Corona. My Corona. I want to bring this story here. And this is really, this is where we really get into this idea that Corona is a targeted virus. And that perhaps the Chinese are even using Corona to target their own population. So I'm going to try to put some of this together here. Now, this is from the mirror.co.uk. And this is, you guys might have heard about the people who were skiing in France, I believe. Oh, this guy was the one in Singapore. There were 5 Brits who were skiing in France that came down with the so-called coronavirus. So this guy is called a super spreader. I guess he's a scout leader, and he speaks from his hospital bed after beating the virus. Okay, this is a really important thing to wrap your head around. Steve Walsh, 53, has spoken from his quarantine hospital bed in a London hospital after he contracted coronavirus at a Singapore conference at the end of January. So that lines up with the timeline right there. Let's check this guy out. Here's the Royals. The coronavirus super spreader in Brighton has spoken from his hospital bed to say he's beaten the deadly infection. This is not the only guy. There's the other guy who had been drinking hot whiskey and honey, who seems to have beaten the coronavirus as well. Steve Walsh, 53, is still in quarantine at Guy's Hospital in London after picking up the virus at a Singapore conference at the end of last month. So that's a Singapore conference. That's outside of China. Okay. Mr. Walsh, data too, is an assistant Cub Scout leader. You know, I tried to join the Cub Scouts as a kid. And I had mixed results around it when I tried to join the Cub Scouts. My first foray into the Cub Scouts was when I was in Southern California, and I was doing all these Cub Scout activities, which I absolutely loved. And I never got a uniform, and then we moved. But man, I love those activities, and I love the Scout mother. Man, she made the best cookies. And then I moved to Northern California. I got into another Scout troop in Millbrae, kind of. Never got the uniform. And I started to do some other stuff in California, never got the uniform. I did get one of my first little pin. I remember being very proud. This is in Southern California. I got my little pin. There was a Cub Scout. I was very proud. I walked up on stage and I got my little Cub Scout pin. But I couldn't deal with the uniform. You know, I would go to like Mervin's, which was a store in California. And they would have all the Cub Scout and Boy Scout supplies and stuff and uniforms. I'd look at them and I try to like figure out, you know, could I see myself wearing these uniforms? The answer was unequivocally no. Anyway, this guy's a Cub Scout leader at St. Leonard's Scout Group, where the children know him as Shere Khan. Isn't that the guy from the Jungle? What is it? Jungle Book? That's weird. You know, there's a lot of like weirdness with the Scouts too, especially who was it? Rex Tillerson. Rex Tillerson was the head of the scouting, wasn't he? And then it got really strange, and now it's, you know, it's like circle jerk around the campfire. No, I'm just kidding. Mr. Walsh from Brighton and Hove said his thoughts were with anyone else who had contracted the virus and thanked the NHS for his full recovery. There he is, looking very chipper and healthy at some sort of scout jamboree. So he went skiing after the coronavirus. How about that? Speaking from hospital, Mr. Walsh said in the statement, "I would like to thank the NHS for their help and care. Whilst I have fully recovered, my thoughts are with others who have contracted coronavirus. As soon as I knew I'd been exposed to a confirmed case of coronavirus, I contacted my GP, that's general practitioner if you're playing at home, NHS 111 and Public Health England. I was advised to attend an isolated room at hospital despite showing no symptoms and subsequently self-isolated at home as instructed. When the diagnosis was confirmed, I was sent to an isolation unit in hospital or remain, and as precaution, my family was also asked to isolate themselves. I also thank my friends, family, and colleagues for their support during recent weeks, and I ask the media to respect our privacy." So there he is with his little scout uni. I mean, obviously he's got to have a real gig. Like being a scout leader does not pay well, if at all. So I wonder what his real gig is. Mr. Walsh, who's beaten the illness himself, lives with his wife, Catherine, and contracted the virus during a conference at the Grand Hyatt in Singapore, organized by Servomex, a British gas analytics company. Oh, there you go. He works for Servomex. Okay. Sounds like something out of the Jetsons. Servomex. So there's your swabbing of the coronavirus in the floor there at the County Oak Medical Center. It's a yoga class. So he was a yoga guy. Oh, interesting. On his way back from the conference, he went on a skiing trip to Lake Contamines. It's a lot like contamination, isn't it? Isn't that word like contamination? Contamines? God, the world is weird. He stayed with two friends who owned the chalet where 11 people were. So this is one of the skiers. So this guy is one of the skiers. There were 5 people that showed up in France in the place of contamination. They are both believed to have coronavirus, and so has their 9-year-old son. After skiing, he flew from Geneva to London on an EasyJet flight before going to his local pub and a group yoga session. So he hits the pub, and then he goes to yoga in a church hall before reportedly walking into Brighton Hospital's A&E with flu symptoms, having been rushed into quarantine in London last week. Mr. Super Spreader. 6 of the infected Britons who came into contact with him are being treated in France and Spain, but the other 5, including the GPs, returned to the Brighton area. Earlier, Paul Ponsford, Emeritus Medical Director of Public Health, PHE, said the 4 new cases of coronavirus announced in the UK Monday were not a complete surprise because they were all contacts of Mr. Walsh. He said contact tracing run by PHE was working very well. He declined to say Mr. Walsh was a super spreader, but he said he was aware of the term. This guy must be doing pretty well financially. Let's go run off, go to France, skiing. Speaking to the BBC Radio 4 Today program, it's nothing to do with their behavior. It's simply a biological fact. This is how he became a super spreader. He was a scout leader. He went to the conference organized by Servomex. He went to the place of contamination for a little ski break with his friends. He flew from Geneva to London on an EasyJet plane, 100 plus passengers. Then he went to his local pub, the Grenadier and Hoe, for a drink on Saturday, February 1st. And then he hit the yoga class on Church Hall Monday, February 3rd. And February 6th, he's off to the NHS. Then he walked into Brighton's Hospital A&E with flu symptoms. So this guy got around. But the bottom line is, that's right, Jess. Bottom line is he beat the virus, theoretically, which means that this feels very, very targeted in a lot of ways. Very targeted. It's that ACE2 receptor that apparently the Asian population has, maybe specifically Chinese, versus the Western population. Now, I talked about this last week, and there seems to be a breakdown as to the blood types that seem to be more resistant to this coronavirus. And they happen to be O and B. The rest of you, you're screwed. Sorry, it's the way it is. Good luck. If you leave anything behind, anything of note and value, please disinfect it so the rest of us can help ourselves. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of how this thing is. And now the Asian blood type does tend to trend towards the A and the AB. Just the way it is. And there's the ACE2 receptor. Now, I stumbled across something that's quite interesting, which I wasn't aware of. And apparently, Wuhan has actually been a place, a site where there have been a fair amount of protests that have been carried out by the locals, which you won't hear about in the Western media. Wuhan has one of the worst air pollution situations in China, which means that it's probably one of the worst air pollution situations in the world, because we know that the Chinese are de facto some of the worst air polluters on the planet. They're outside of any kind of regulation that the quote, so-called UN or any kind of like international group that is focusing on clean air. The Chinese, they get a free pass. They get a free pass because they're manufacturing a lot of shit. And a lot of that shit is cheaper than in other places. So the globalists hold their nose and they look the other way. This is what's happening there. Now, people in Wuhan apparently are having and have had problems breathing, respiratory problems, burning eyes, like the quality of life in Wuhan, even pre-coronavirus, was nothing to write home about. Okay, it sucked. So there had been protests there in Wuhan because people were fed up with the amount of air pollution that they had to deal with on a daily basis. So there are some people who are putting one and one together, and that not only are the Chinese corralling and quarantining people who are supposedly ill with the coronavirus, but they're also picking people up. They're also taking dissidents, people they've targeted as being protesters or connected to any kind of social unrest. Now, you've seen this. You've seen people who are well. I mean, if you've looked at some of the video, people being picked up, snatched up. There's a video of this one woman who's driving her car. Now, apparently, that's a big no-no. You can't be driving your car in downtown Wuhan. They pull her over, and man, she is fighting like crazy. This woman's a wildcat. It takes about 4 or 5 guys to subdue her, and then one of them takes a syringe out, hits her with a syringe, and then she's out. You've seen videos of people being picked up and put in the box, basically boxes on the back of pickup trucks and taken away. So it feels like that China is taking advantage of a situation where they may be able to clean up their own backyard. And everybody in China is tracked. Everybody in China has a social credit score. You see, this is what happens when you have a social credit score. In times of crisis and calamity, if the governing body decides that you're a bit too hot and they don't want you to be a part of their system, out you go. So I think it's an interesting development. That's just my 2 cents around this. There was something else here with Corona that I wanted to bring up. Okay, we got the super spreader who seems to be recovering, right? Where's that other story? Oh yeah, here it is. Now, this is Steve Bannon. And again, a lot of you guys either don't trust or don't like Steve Bannon. I am kind of somewhere, I think Steve Bannon's quite interesting, and but I don't trust him. And I think he's very intelligent, and he has a very good grasp on the international game. And he's been specifically spending lots of time on the Chinese side of the equation here. So this is from the 1st of February. And this goes back to the 4th when this story ran. And this is CNews or gnews.org. And Miles Guo announced the Wuhan coronavirus is made by the CCP. So this gives you perhaps, so if the coronavirus was created, and let's follow the trail again. So we have Charles Lieber, who's a central figure in all this. This is the guy at Harvard that was arrested, put $1 million cash. Okay, that's not your typical bail bondsman kind of arrangement. If your bail was $1 million, you'd have to put up 10% of $1 million. So we're talking about $100,000. And then the bail bonds would put, no, this is $1 million cash. Somebody theoretically had to go in there and write a check or have some, or a, cashier's check, something that is going to essentially be his bond. It's a lot of money, $1 million cash. So we start with Charles Lieber in Harvard. He's got the direct pipeline. He's building the level 4 lab. We're paying him $50,000 a month on top of his Harvard salary. And remember, this guy is also an expert in nanotechnology. Now think about that. He's an expert in delivering extremely small particles that are like tiny, micronized robots. And he's also in virology. Do the math there, okay? So one of the things around Corona, or this virus that we made, that they may not have been able to intersect, is the potential for this to also be triggered or at least bonded to some kind of nano agent. Now, nanos are really small, and they can penetrate the brain-blood barrier. That's how small they are. This is an unexplored potential for coronavirus. Now, I'm not saying it is, but remember, that's Charles Lieber's background. And this is the guy that set up the Corona lab. Of course, we have the batch of whatever it is they're working on go up to Canada, Winnipeg, and then we have the Winnipeg connection with the 2 teachers being kicked out, or the 2 researchers being kicked out of Winnipeg because they figured out that they were stealing shit. And then ultimately, it was being funneled into that level 4 lab in Wuhan. So that's the path. Let's go down this rabbit hole, shall we? According to Miles Guo, the publication of this article became a turning point in the history of mankind. It opened a Pandora's box of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So this guy who is connected to Steve Bannon. Zilu is the most prestigious Chinese military website. Zilu means West Road in Chinese. Somebody needs to put an E in there, which is a knockoff, West Point. So here it is. As the largest military website in China, Zilu, website adhering to the banner of the online spiritual homeland, has attracted countless thoughtful and purposeful netizens, forming a growing group of military enthusiasts. It currently has 1 million open forums, and more than 400,000 private forums, 15 million registered users. The average daily single post traffic can reach as many as millions. It's huge. There was a CCP propaganda video with the same message accusing the U.S. of creating Wuhan coronavirus to attack China. So they're saying that this was created by the United States to attack the Chinese people. The article on Zilu.com to acknowledge that the Wuhan coronavirus is man-made. Here's the simplified translation of the article. That's real simplified. The U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross's recent remarks during Fox interview is quite disturbing. He said that the Wuhan coronavirus would help to accelerate the return of jobs to North America. But his shocking remarks are not totally baseless. Chinese scientists found 4 protein inserts in the Wuhan coronavirus, which led them to believe the virus was designed to kill with SARS-like disguise and ease of spreading. It is a man-made virus for sure, but why did someone design such a virus? The behavior of the U.S. government after the coronavirus outbreak has been quite suspicious. The U.S. overreacted to the viral outbreak in China. It violates human rights by mandating quarantine and bringing back U.S. citizens from Wuhan. Then came the shocking remarks from Ross. This is from that website. Their cold-bloodedness to the extreme tipped their hands. There were too many coincidences in the Wuhan viral outbreak: time, location, dense population, and even bats. U.S. Army collects large quantity of bats for research. Both SARS and Wuhan pneumonia were caused by bats. That's not true. Why are there so many coincidences? Who are the black hands behind it? Why did SARS always target Chinese? Is there a possibility for biochemical warfare we are facing now? So this gets into SARS, the whole biochemical warfare thing. What else do we have? Let's see, what else? Many do not believe that the U.S. used any bacterial weapons, but this should not be a surprise. The U.S. used gasoline bombs and poison gas to attack Chinese army without winning the war. In the end, Truman even assessed the use of an atomic bomb. So this is kind of anti-U.S. I get that. In 2018, Putin confirmed the U.S. was collecting genes from the Russian people. This became a concern because they did not want the genes to be used to make bacterial biological weapons targeting them. So if this is true, which I do believe there is some truth to this, that the actual virus itself was hatched up and created here, but it was also smuggled out by Chinese nationals. And that's where everything gets a bit wobbly, right? There's a wobble there with that. And then it's somehow released from the lab in Wuhan. And it seems as though there is a significant piggybacking on people who are not exhibiting, but we have. So, it's like, let's not waste a good crisis. Let's not let a good crisis go to waste. That's a Rahm Emanuelism. It seems like the Chinese are theoretically, again, piggybacking on that. So these are the latest developments now that I'm just, you're going to get Corona updates here on a daily basis for a while. And again, I'm not doing this to, bring any fear into your life, because you want to know things, right? Like that story about that guy who's a super spreader that was able to recover. He's not the only one. You had the whiskey drinker recovered. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it's always good to practice, good hygiene and make sure your space is clean and, don't touch your mucoid membranes and, wash your hands. I think it's really important. I mean, it's brought a lot of awareness into my life around this stuff, even just in general. And it seems as though there are other factors here. Now, the big piece around Corona has to do with the supply chain. That is the big elephant. That's or the big gorilla, whatever large beast is in the room that people are not talking about. And our good friend Masaki Miyagawa, who gets a lot of his really fascinating tools from China, has not been able to get them. Right? We have the Hyundai plant in South Korea. They've shut down production because they can't get parts from China. Toyota in Japan has had to shut down production. They're not getting parts from China. Can you see the net effect here? It could be significant, very, very significant. So the supply chain is going to be the story. And then the fear around the supply chain. When things aren't showing up, you have to wait 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, for a certain part for your car. What are you going to do? I'm sure that, we're a very resourceful species, and I'm sure that they can begin to remanufacture these things in other parts of the world. And what's really interesting is the mindset, it's the mindset. So when I was talking with somebody yesterday who we were going over this, and I said, well, the real issue here is the supply chain. And then he's a good guy and everything, probably even in the chat room today, or he'll certainly listen. And he said, well, that'll be, too bad for Walmart. Like, Walmart's like, ha, 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 Walmart reaps what it sows. Just true to some extent. But there's almost like this schadenfreude that we have in our society where it's like, okay, you get what you're getting it now, but not being able to realize that that's not the only place that's going to suffer ultimately from this downturn in the supply chain. It won't be. It may be the biggest and most egregious offender in the supply chain mafia, but it'll ultimately kind of spread across a number of different industries. And so then what will happen? What will be the economic result around that. It's yet to be seen. Now, can the Chinese recover? Can they recover? Possibly. Could they recover quickly so they can start pumping out stuff? But maybe this is all part of a bigger plan to ultimately economically cripple China. But I wouldn't necessarily, let's put it this way. I wouldn't have a problem with the theory. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a great deal of sense to cripple China economically. Like, this is how it's going to get done. I mean, there's no way we can pump the brakes on them in any other way. We can't fight them in a conventional ground war, theoretically. We can't stop them with their one belt, one road, because they're rolling. They've got all these other countries that are on board because they all want the 5G. They all want quick access to parts and goods and all the things that the one belt, one road will theoretically link up with Western China, or Eastern China, and North Africa and Russia and the Middle East and Europe. You can't really pump the brakes on that, at least not that way. But if you have a virus that is crippling the ability to have output and distribution, well, that's a whole other story. And that's a big story, actually. It's a very, very big story. And one of the things that Masaki and I were talking about is, what would it be like to put production in the hands of people, right? What would it be like for you or I or your neighbors, whatever, to be able to produce the things that you actually need? Does it sound impossible? It's not. You ever hear of a 3D printer? A 3D printer is essentially a micronization of a factory. Just like we used to have these massive computers, that are all basically shrunken down now into the size of a cell phone. I wish I had my cell phone with me. But according to the experts, the amount of computers that were used by NASA to theoretically handle and manage the Apollo flight, all those computers basically fit into your cell phone now. I find that a bit of a stretch or a bit of a reach, but maybe not too much. So if that's possible, there's the micronization of everything. Like, you used to have a 100,000 watt transmitter and a radio tower and all this, all the equipment that goes along with having your own TV station or radio station. Look what I'm doing now. I'm broadcasting directly to you through my computer. It's the micronization of the media process. So we have it with media, right? We have it with data and computing. So why not production? Well, the 3D printer can do that, has done it. There's a business in Austin that creates houses made out of giant 3D printers. They can whip up a house in 72 hours with this thing. So it's not inconceivable that we could be engaged in our own level of manufacturing. And I talked about this when the True Node was in Virgo, and this whole idea of the maker culture. And the 3D printer is an essential item, an essential tool for the maker culture. And if you have the right program, you can create anything. If you wanted to create a part for your car, and you had the right program and you had the right materials, it could come right out of your 3D printer. You may have to do it in sections and then assemble it, but that's a whole other thing. So the micronization of industry is something that, this is the real power. If we could, and again, let's just live in a perfect world for just a moment. Come into my version of utopia. My version of utopia would be like, you live with a group of people, not in your house, obviously, although maybe that's possible, but kind of a loose fitting group of people, and that you have some common interests. Number one, your common interest would be you kind of agree upon certain things, right? Basic fundamental stuff. You'd have to agree on basic fundamental stuff. Like, you're all in. Like, you don't have to debate the foundational reasons why you're all kind of living together. And that would be TBD. But once you got that out of the way, then you say, okay, well, what do you do? And what do you do? And what do you do? And what do you do? What do you do? Well, I do this, and I do this, and I do this. Okay, well, great. Let's pull this together. We got some common area here. Let's have a nice big fat garden. Let's grow some stuff. Oh, somebody has an interest in chickens. Well, why don't you go run the chicken thing? right? Somebody has an interest in this or that or this and that. Next thing you know, you have, a micronization of a macro community. And if you had a couple of people that were versed in 3D printing, you had 2 or 3 3D printers, you guys could learn from each other, and like, bang, now you can make your own shit. You don't need the supply chain. Wouldn't that be liberating? Be totally liberating. And we're not that far away. We're not that far. If you can create a house on a massive 3D printer, what else can you create? A lot. So this is, in a weird way, right? Like in a really weird way. And humans are very resourceful. We're really, really resourceful. And we can make, we can make stuff on the fly. We can figure things out. And sometimes, how do I say this? Austerity or restraints can actually be great, great teachers. If there's a limitation, we figure out how to work with the limitation. Now, too many limitations are paralytic because you get too many limitations and then you're in a box and you can't get out of the box. But enough limitations where you press against gravity, that's a different thing. Then that's where people, well, where's the workaround with this? This isn't working. So I got to figure something else out here, right? Anyway, so this could be interesting on some level, right? Possibly. All right. Here's another piece here. There are 2 political pieces. One has to do with Roger Stone. I want to bring Roger Stone into the conversation. And this is an interesting deal. What's the weather like right now? Where are we at? 40 degrees. 40 degrees out there right now. Okay. Where's this Roger? Roger Stone is looking at 10 years, 9 to 10 years. 9 to 10 years. It's a lot. Now, Roger Stone is he's a complex character. I personally, I think he's creepy. I think he's creepy and slimy. And one of the things that, if you have followed the Roger Stone story, is his connection to NXIVM. He was a legal advocate, almost performing the role as a lobbyist for NXIVM. So he's got NXIVM roots. He also has some other strange roots as well. For me, Stone has almost always occupied the Roy Cohn position in Donald Trump's life. Like, he became sort of the modern Roy Cohn for Donald Trump. Let's read this. Trump rages against Roger Stone's very unfair recommended prison sentence. So this is going to be interesting. Will Donald Trump pardon Roger Stone if indeed there is a prison, if he's found guilty, or whatever he's found guilty? I mean, they're trying to connect Stone to the whole Russiagate thing. This is really the nexus of this. And Stone, they're trying to essentially say that Stone engineered the WikiLeaks dump, that he knew Julian Assange, and that Stone was the guy that was masterminding everything so that it could ultimately help Trump. Now, this doesn't even get into the other, WikiLeaks related scandals, AKA Seth Rich. Seth Rich is never spoken about, by the way. So let's get into this. President Donald Trump is furious. He wasn't furious about Paul Manafort now, was he? No. Not furious about that. Not in the least. Paul Manafort's sitting in jail. Not a lot of fury there from Trump on him. In a tweet fired off almost at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so Trump's up to 2 o'clock in the morning tweeting. Does the guy sleep? Does Trump sleep? He may not sleep. This guy may be power napping between 3 and 5 a.m., and maybe about 3 and 5 p.m. In a tweet fired off almost at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard, Trump complained that Stone's case is a horrible and very unfair situation. The real crimes were on the other side as nothing happens to them. He tweeted, cannot allow this miscarriage of justice. This is a deceptive comment here. Nothing ever happens to them. We're the fucking president. Why don't you make something happen to them? You know, when you were running for president, it was like, you know, lock her up. I'm going to hire somebody who's going to go after her. I mean, he was threatening Hillary Clinton at almost every turn during those debates. What happened? Nada. None of these people, like Anthony Weiner's out running around, Huma Abedin's out running around, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was involved in a major blackmail scandal with the Awan brothers, she's running around. Nothing ever happens to these people. You're the president. Make it happen. Didn't take him long to fire Vindman or Sondland, now did it? This is a horrible and very unfair situation. The real crimes were on the other side. Okay. They call foreign election interference a deadly adversary, even though Stone was never accused of working with Russians or WikiLeaks. It's unclear whom exactly Trump is accusing of committing real crimes. Disgraceful, he wrote of Stone's case now or previously. Any reasonable person knows that if this is the actual sentence for Roger Stone, that is an unhinged miscarriage of justice. Look, there are things, sometimes we deal with divine justice. It's the way it is. Sometimes things look unfair on the surface, and maybe, just maybe, this is the hand of divine intervention and justice, kind of reaching in and tapping that person on the shoulder. It's like, it may look a certain way, but really what you're dealing with is something much bigger. And there are crimes of the soul here. And these are the people that are just playing their parts and playing their role. Sometimes this happens, right? It's the way it is. It's going to be very interesting to watch what happens to Stone. I mean, I find him mildly entertaining and somebody who kind of really knows his way around the Beltway. Like I remember when he went to Washington and he went to advocate for Alex Jones. Alex Jones and his people showed up for one of these Alex Jones moments, and they had a press conference. And Jones comes off as being a blowhard buffoon, and not really. He doesn't come off really good in press conferences. Period. End of story. But when Stone got up there, man, he ran the whole thing. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had the presence of mind. He had the rhetoric. I mean, the guy is an oiled insider, completely oiled. And of course, he was deeply embedded with Alex Jones during the run-up of the Trump campaign. And Alex Jones was responsible for turning a bunch of Ron Paul people towards Trump during the election. That was Alex Jones's role, because Alex Jones had been a Ron Paul backer for a very long time, less government, libertarian, and then all of a sudden he's thrown down with Trump. And Roger Stone was there every step of the way. Roger Stone was employed by Alex Jones. Whatever happened to Jerome Corsi, by the way? You notice how Jerome Corsi has just kind of gone away? He was another guy that was kind of deeply involved with Alex Jones during that time. And Corsi theoretically was ratting on Roger Stone throughout this whole process. This goes all the way back to the Mueller investigation. This is where the Roger Stone stuff started. He was one of these people that was subpoenaed by ultimately the Mueller investigation. And again, I don't have a whole lot of love for the guy, but he was pulled out of his home at about 4 a.m. Of course, CNN was there. They were tipped off. I mean, the whole thing is just, this is just rigged. Wired and rigged in a lot of ways. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with and a lot of this is kind of a get back too, because I think there are people, as much as there's both sides doing nods and winks at each other, the left and the right really are just part of the same ultimate strategy and goal, which is true. Even inside of that, there are people that get pissed off and their interests aren't met, or they're met in ways that are disproportionate. So do you think there are people that are pissed off at Donald Trump? Absolutely. Do you think that they want to hurt Donald Trump? Absolutely. Is that how they're going to go about hurting Donald Trump? Absolutely, because apparently you can't hurt him any other way. He's got too many powerful people behind him. That's my theory and opinion. He's got the Sheldon Adelsons and the Paul Singers and the Bernie Marcuses of the world, the Wilbur Rosses of the world, the Mercers of the world. These are the people that back Donald Trump, and they're really freaking powerful. The Bob Crafts of the world. These are Trump backers. They're filthy rich. If you put all of them together with their combined assets, these people are whales. They're major economic whales. These are the people that sat in with Jared Kushner and worked with him to create the USMCA. And these are the people who are going to profit from it. Not people like you and I, not Joe Main Street. That's not happening. There's very little. It's really interesting. So Trump says, we're creating all these jobs. Well, we got all these jobs. And that may be true. But how are the jobs manifesting? More than likely, they're manifesting through, number one, either state, local, or federal government positions, which count as jobs. Or two, they're corporate jobs. But they're not about being independent. I don't believe, and I could be completely mistaken and wrong, but I don't get that there's a lot of love for entrepreneurialism here and individualism here. There's certainly a ton of Wall Street love and not a lot of Main Street love. So these are the people that get in and craft the USMCA, which, by the way, the Democrats had no problem signing off on. Boy, they didn't push back on Trump with that, did they? Not at all. Not at all, because they also have big time money interests as well. The Democrats, as we've seen, they're globalists. They left Main Street and they left Joe Sixpack a long time ago. The USMCA is a globalist trade pact. That's what it is. So the reason why you can't get to Trump is because of these very powerful people that are behind him. It's true. And of course, maybe there's some kind of weird supernatural effect with Trump. Like it just happens. Like people that go after him and badmouth him, and their lives just, get turned upside down. And it's, it's consistent. The Trump curse, very unusual. It's very, very unusual. There is that. But then there's the other side of it, which is the alliances that are made in order to stay in power. And this is what you're going up against. So it'll be very interesting. They can't get to him, so they'll get to the people around him. They'll get to the Roger Stones or the Paul Manaforts or the Michael Flynn's or whoever these people are. They'll go after them and they'll make them hurt because they're way down on the, on the Trump chain there, chain of command. All right, last story of the day, last story of the morning happens to deal with Michael Bloomberg, the one guy that could really put together a significant challenge to Donald Trump. Apparently, this was leaked now. This is from 2015 when Bloomberg was mayor of New York. Now I've listened to the video, and he's basically saying, like, we got to send the cops in to the lower income neighborhoods. We have to have a presence, and we have to throw the youth in those neighborhoods up against the wall and frisk them and take the weapons from them, because he's targeting high crime neighborhoods. In 2015, Michael Bloomberg defended stop and risk while acknowledging that it led to disproportionately more arrests of Black and Hispanic men. Why? Because they carry guns, apparently, in New York City. Bloomberg also asserted that in order to cut down gun crimes, it was necessary to throw minority men up against the wall and frisk them. His past support for the policy was widely expected to be a political liability, but a Quinnipiac poll released Monday showed that Bloomberg was second among Democrats in terms of support from Black voters. Billionaire media magnate Michael Bloomberg aggressively defended a stop and frisk policy. Now, on Twitter, this thing is on fire because Twitter is the universe of the wokey wokes. Bloomberg also asserted that the demographic of murderers and murder victims were so similar you can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. Now, I ask you, would that be a statement? Would that be an indefensible statement? The unfortunate truth is probably not. Probably not. I mean, if you look statistically around the crimes in inner city and the numbers, and you're able to get into the demographics, there it is. I don't think we're dealing with something here that is breaking news or yesterday's news. It's the way it is. Now, conversely, if you're down to Wall Street and start frisking for white collar crimes, well, that'd be really interesting now, wouldn't it? Can you just see this now? Cops frisking bankers, high-ranking Wall Street traders, taking their cell phones and their pocket calculators. That doesn't happen now, does it? And by the way, white-collar crime is egregious and deadly as one-on-one physical altercations and abusive one-on-one crime. It just has a different kind of impact, different kind. But the white-collar crime, in many cases, has created the situation in inner cities where people have been consigned to these realities. Now, I'm not saying you can't get out of that reality. Anybody can get out of their reality. There are plenty of stories of people who've grown up in very difficult situations, in very difficult neighborhoods in America, and they've laughed. You know, they've gone through things, and they've made themselves better humans and are success stories. So even though you grow up in an environment where you've got maybe 2 strikes against you, which is unfortunate, or 1 strike against you out of the chute, doesn't mean that you can't transform your life. Anybody can transform their lives. In order to do it, though, it takes a great deal of clarity and honesty and integrity and character and spiritual power. It's available to everybody. The biggest thing when I was managing this apartment building in Oakland for 4 years of my life, when Saturn was transiting my 4th house in Pisces, by the way, the biggest thing that I found, and one of the most difficult things for people in that neighborhood, in that quote unquote demographic, was actually stepping outside of their neighborhood and stepping outside of their demographic. Well, I talked to adults who had never seen snow before, and very few of them had actually even been to San Francisco, which is right across the bay. Very few of them. I mean, it's that insular. So in order to be able to at times transcend and leave the bounds and the bonds of one's cultivation, community, and upbringing, you have to be able to separate yourself from that. You have to step out. And that's the way it is from separating yourself from groupthink or group thought anyway. Doesn't matter how many zeros you've got in your bank account. In order to be fully individuated, you've got to be able to step outside of your cultural paradigm. You have to, in order to see it clearly. And when you can see it clearly for all of its flaws and all of its potential wonderful gifts and connections, or whatever that thing is, right? You can enter back into it, but you're going to enter back into it from a very, very different place. And one of the things that's always been kind of challenging in that community is, and you can see this with certain athletes, like Russell Wilson, who came from a fairly privileged background. I think his father was a lawyer, adjudicator, maybe even been a judge. Russell Wilson did not suffer at all. And he came into the Seattle Seahawks And he was this positive guy, and and there were other guys from other parts of quote unquote America, right, who were like, man, we are not down with this dude because he's not real. He wasn't street enough. So even there you can see this kind of separation and divide, which can be very, very challenging. And I think that can be one of the hardest things for any group. If you're really, really embedded in a group and you step out and then you make your own way in the world, how are people going to react to you? How are they going to react to you? There can be a lot of judgment around that. And a lot of judgment, and people don't like judgment in that way. It's like people want to feel comfortable. But in order to grow, you've got to feel uncomfortable, and that's one of the hardest things that we all have to wrap our heads around. So it's a very complex dynamic, very, very complex. And Michael Bloomberg is having to step through a bunch of poo around this thing, and it may not matter one iota. The guy's got shitloads of money, and he could just probably move on. And if they ask him about it and what he meant by that, it'll be interesting to see how he responds. Will this stop his campaign in his tracks? Probably not. Will it catch a fire? It maybe move a few people away from him. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. What it's looking like is it's looking like Bloomberg and Bernie Sanders are going to wind up in a brokered convention. That's what it's going to look like. And the brokered convention could tear the Democratic Party right in half. We may be witnessing the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. Now, there could be a new party that comes out of this, possibly, because I think the future of the Democratic Party is more AOC than Nancy Pelosi. It's just the way it is. That's the way the demographics are stacking up. And in 2024, we're going to have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction with Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. And that's generally a signature or a signatory of socialism, that conjunction. So that's ultimately where the Democratic Party is headed. And Bernie Sanders, this is going to be a real litmus test for the Democrats because they don't like him. They don't like him because Bernie will take their money. He'll take their money flat out. And they know that, by the way. That's why they're terrified of Bernie Sanders. They'll take the big donor money. He'll take, it'll be interesting to see if he goes after the big whales. Like, will he go after Paul Singer? Will he go after Bernie Marcus? Will he go after Sheldon Adelson? Will he go after the Mercers? He took a swipe at Jeff Bezos yesterday. He was talking about the conditions of working in a warehouse for Amazon. Okay, well, focus on that, Bernie, because in 5 years from now, those people won't even be employed at Amazon anymore. You'll have robots doing their jobs. So go ahead and focus on that now. You're missing the big picture. But it's okay. It gives his campaign some juice because he's a man of the people. He's a man of the people. I could do Bernie Sanders all day. All right, let me check back in with you guys, see where you're at, see what's going on in Chatlandia. Let's see what we got here. Women can run heavy equipment, computer programming, network installations. Absolutely. No doubt. Auto welding is shorter, I think. Nonsense. Bernie is a huge scam. He had everything he needed in 2016 to do that, but he didn't. He is a huge scam. Of course he is. Yeah, I can raise children, cook, clean, support system. You guys got a nice little dialogue going on in chat today. Uncle Glenn always brings the gems. What's he saying? Give a man a gun and he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank and he can rob the world. Great. Love that. I love that. Great saying. Great, great, great. What else do we have here? Remember when China executed the people responsible for putting plastic in baby food, maybe only because they were caught, like in sports? Yes. Kelly from Vegas, women can do the same trades as men with training, mechanical, HVAC, just as men can do the female related trades, sewing, daycare. Well, sure, we can all do whatever. We can do whatever. You know, we're flexible humans. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from my interview with Zeus Youmanis, who is Regina's husband, was his tale of being on a farm and growing up in Pennsylvania, where everybody did everything, because that's how you had to live, right? If you were, you know, everybody did everything. They all did it. Like if you were a man, you needed to know how to sew. You just did. You needed to know how to sew. Like if you were out in the range and, you know, you were doing the cattle run and something happened and something ripped, if you couldn't sew that thing, you're screwed. When I was a kid, I got my mother to teach me to, you know, how to stitch things and stuff like that. I said, hey, teach me how to do this. You know, I want to learn. I want to learn. Now, I didn't really brush up on those skills, but I mean, I think that this idea that we have been really segregated in terms of learning and doing, yeah, I think that that's taken place. And I think, you know, having kind of an all-purpose mentality has been lost in many ways, because that's how people did things. There wasn't anybody, it wasn't like, okay, you do this, and everybody did everything, because that's how you had to survive. And since we got into specialization, that changed. But I'm going to give you something interesting, a little interesting factoid, that at the beginning of industrialization, it was very hard to get men to work in factories. Very, very hard. So if you look at the beginning of industrialization, a lot of the employees in factories were women and children. Children because they were probably poor and their parents forced them to work, or they just got off the orphan train. And women because it offered them an opportunity to make money, and they were more inclined, this is a fact now, they were more inclined to do some of this. Men did not want to work in factories. They did not. And this is one of the bigger challenges of industrialization. And eventually men were brought in. Like men were more interested in, you know, tinkering and doing their own thing and working on the farm or whatever, right? So what'll happen ultimately is when automation comes in, and it will come in. It will come in. Even China will wind up saying, look, we can't afford to have a breakdown in our supply chain anymore. You know, how can we ramp up AI? And we don't need as many people anyway. That'll be coming. But when automation comes, you're gonna have people out of work again. And will that mean that men will theoretically, and perhaps even women at this point, will return to the pre-industrialized kind of psyche and roles that were happening then? And if so, what will be the net effect of that? It's an interesting question. We're in a time of massive change, acceleration. We're watching the world bifurcate before our very eyes in a lot of ways. The veils are thinning, and every day is an adventure in consciousness. Every day is an exercise in being able to grow, get better, expand your perspective, get more grounded, continue to align yourself with Logos so that the true will can come through in your life, and at which point you're capable of just about anything when you're aligned with that. Where else are you going to be? It's happening. It's here now. And between Tuesday and Thursday, we take little forays and little side roads to kind of look at what's happening in the world and pull it apart and be able to see kind of what's behind things. In the meantime, it's always about getting up to the next level, rounding up to the next decimal. And that's what we do here. So today, I urge you all to take the best approach you can in order to do that. Make your life a better life. Make your life a better life for yourself. Make your life a better life for the people around you. It all starts with you. You are the seed of the Aquarian age, right? You are the golden seed of the true Aquarian age. And the Aquarian age is going to happen next week. It didn't happen in 1962. It's happening right now. It's happening right now. And you get to be the person that is the exemplar, the gate, the portal for that. Okay? Have a great day. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to save what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame, which of course is way more than 15 Minutes of Flame. If you'd like to subscribe to this, go to my website, robertphoenix.com. I'll also leave a link here in the show page. We got a few nice little tiers there for everybody to check in on. And so far, it's going nicely. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed. I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, take good care of yourself. Bye for now.